Sōya Azashiro, the 8th Kenpachi, is somebody that a lot of Bleach fans may have never heard of. He doesn't appear within the manga or the anime, as he exists exclusively within a 2-part novel series called Spirits Are Forever With You. Azashiro possesses what I genuinely believe to be one of the most overpowered broken Bankai in all of Bleach. Reading through the long list of abilities that his Zanpakutō possesses is absolutely staggering, and you quickly understand why the Gotei 13 struggled to capture Azashiro, and why even Aizen himself had admitted that the Kyōka Suigetsu would have been useless against him. And lastly, there's a reason why the Royal Guard had to personally intervene to deal with this man. Do you know who else that the Zero Division had to intervene to deal with? These are all of the individuals that are subscribed to the channel. Only 20% of the people who watch these videos are subscribed, so if you enjoy these Bleach breakdowns, then hit the bell notification and the subscribe button for even more Bleach content just like this. Now, before diving into Azashiro's Zanpakutō Urozakuro and its laundry list of abilities, we need to talk about the past of Azashiro, and what makes him one of the most feared Shinigami within the history of the Soul Society, because his past directly informs us as to how his Zanpakutō functions and why it manifested in the way that it did. Sōya Azashiro was born into the noble Azashiro family. They weren't at the same level of nobility as the Kuchiki or Shihoin households, they were a tier below that, more comparable to the Kyoraku or Omaida families, but they were still a respected name within the Soul Society, as they were known for producing members who were proficient in both swordsmanship and Kidō. The problem is that over the course of several generations, the Azashiro family started to get complacent. They stopped valuing combat strength and started prioritizing wealth. The young Sōya Azashiro was no different to this, as he grew up believing that money would be able to resolve any problem, and that there was no real need to learn how to fight when financial influence could buy a way out of any situation. His older sister was the exception. She wanted to become a Shinigami, as she wanted to preserve the family's honor through strength rather than money, and she managed to convince Sōya to at least entertain the idea of following the same path. But the noble families of the Soul Society were ruthless back then. They were locked in a constant struggle for dominance, and any house that showed even a hint of weakness became a target. The Azashiro family was falsely accused of crimes that they didn't commit, and they were sentenced to execution. And it wasn't a clean one either. They were thrown into a pit and forced to fight hollows. One by one, the family members were slaughtered. Sōya and his sister were the last ones standing. The other nobles had agreed to let survivors live. Predictably, they broke that promise. More hollows were brought in to finish the job. Sōya's sister intervened as she killed the final hollow, but she suffered fatal wounds in the process. As she lay there dying, she made a single request for her younger brother: become a strong Shinigami. Understandably, this broke something inside of Azashiro. Kubo drew a sketch of him cowering on the ground, watching his sister die, and it's one of the most impactful visuals within the entire novel. Look at it from this point of view. This was a boy who had believed his entire life that power wasn't important, but now, while in this pit surrounded by the corpses of his family on hollows, no amount of money in the world was able to save his family or bring his sister back. It was because of this trauma which had caused his Zanpakutō spirit Urozakuro to manifest for the very first time. The reishi around them was suddenly ripped apart and weaponized as he slaughtered the remaining nobles and hollows alike. The surviving hollows were blamed for the deaths of the nobles and executed, which allowed Sōya to escape unnoticed into Rokongai. And from that point onwards, he carried his sister's dying words with him as the foundation for everything that he would go on to do. After he spent time wandering Rokongai and reflecting on his sister's final request, Azashiro set his sights on the highest target available, which was the title of Kenpachi, the fastest route to becoming the strongest Shinigami in the Soul Society. 250 years before the defeat of Aizen, Azashiro located the 7th Kenpachi Kuriyashiki while he was celebrating with Shunsui Kyoraku and the members of the 11th Division in Rokongai after a successful hollow extermination. Shunsui was immediately suspicious. This young man didn't appear to be carrying a Zanpakutō, but yet he was boldly requesting a duel with one of the Gotei 13's most powerful captains. Shunsui warned Kuriyashiki to be careful, but the 7th Kenpachi accepted the challenge regardless. regardless, as he asked Shunsui to act as a witness. The moment that the duel officially began, Kuroshiki's body was ripped apart from the inside. Blood erupted from every part of him like a tornado of blades that detonated within his flesh. No one saw Azashiro draw a weapon or even see him move. The 11th Division members were screaming that he had cheated, but a dying Kuroshiki activated his Shikai Gagaku Kairo in order to push his own subordinates back as he ordered them to accept his defeat with honor. Azashiro noted that Kuroshiki could have won if he'd used his Bankai from the offset, but the 7th Kenpachi had refused to unleash it because the collateral damage would have endangered his own men. Azashiro called that decision foolish. Kuroshiki with his final breath told Azashiro never to make the same mistake he did, that holding back against an opponent is a betrayal of what it means to carry the name Kenpachi. And as quickly as that, Sōya Azashiro inherited the title. He became the 8th Kenpachi and the captain of the 11th Division. What's insane is that he would only hold the position for roughly a year before the events leading to his imprisonment. A single year as a captain and the damage he caused was enough to earn him 19,500 years in Muken. During that year, Azashiro revealed his true ambitions, and they were staggering in scale, as he wanted to transform the criminals of Rukongai into powerful, obedient soldiers through psychosurgery, a real and deeply taboo medical procedure involving the alteration of the brain in order to change behavior. He presented this plan to the Central 46, and they laughed in his face. They told him to go ahead with this ridiculous idea, fully expecting him to fail. But Azashiro successfully operated on the criminals and reformed them into loyal, capable soldiers under his command. His success was an overwhelming vindication, and the Central 46 didn't take kindly to being proven wrong. Worse still, the soldiers were loyal to Azashiro, not to the nobles or to the Central 46 themselves. So predictably, they did what the noble families always do. They fabricated false charges and accused Azashiro of altering souls without permission and branded him a criminal. Azashiro still didn't care, as he continued with his plans regardless, and with his ambitions having grown far beyond Rukongai, his ultimate goal was now to perform psychosurgery on every human in the world of the living, removing the negative emotions like grief, regret, and sadness which cause lingering souls to transform into hollows. If he was able to eliminate the source of hollification at its root, then there would be no more hollows. Hueco Mundo would be empty and hell would have no new arrivals. The entire cycle of spiritual suffering would thus end. In order to accomplish this on a global scale, he needed the abilities of a specific Arrancar named Roka Paramiya, whose thread-based power was able to transfer Reiatsu between beings. With Roka amplifying Azashiro's reach, he believed that he could extend his Bankai across the entire world and complete the procedure on every human within a single year. The Gotei 13 fought against Azashiro, but they lost. Azashiro defeated hundreds of Shinigami, including multiple captains during this revolt, and the nature of his power made him functionally untouchable. He only surrendered once he sensed the arrival of the Zero Division themselves descending in order to apprehend him. His reaction was interesting, as he simply said, "I see, even the Soul King rejects my plan," and so he gave up. He was sentenced to 19,500 years in Muken, the deepest and most secure prison within the Soul Society. This is the same facility that would later house Aizen. Azashiro Zanpakutō Urozakuro translates to rain and dew pomegranate. This Zanpakutō is permanently in its Bankai state. It has no sealed form that anyone has ever seen, and there's no release command that Azashiro knows. By his own admission, he doesn't even know his Zanpakutō's true name. Urozakuro is the Bankai name, and it's the only name he has for it. The blade has been in Bankai for over 250 years without a single interruption. When the captains of the Gotei 13 discussed Azashiro during the emergency meeting after his escape from Muken, several of them, including Shunsui and Unohana, remembered that they had never once seen his Zanpakutō during his tenure as captain. The Central 46 questioned him about it, as he revealed to them that he was already showing it. They just couldn't perceive it. Komamura speculated that it might be an an illusion-type blade similar to Kyōka Suigetsu, and Shunsui admitted that he found that comparison plausible. Urozakuro's core ability is fusion. It allows Azashiro to merge his entire being with his surroundings and to control everything that he has fused with. This extends to literally everything, including the air, earth, buildings, walls, organic and inorganic matter, even living and non-living things, so physical, mental, and spiritual entities are all subject to its influence. According to Yoruichi, Azashiro's inner world is constantly fused with the outside world. This is why his exact location is nearly impossible to pinpoint. Before he was imprisoned in Muken, Azashiro had spent years gradually fusing himself with the entirety of the Serete, so every wall, street, room, and particle of air within the massive structure has become a part of him, and the applications that stem from this are absurd. Hyper-awareness is the most immediately dangerous application of Urozakuro. Because Azashiro's being is merged with his environment, he can perceive everything that occurs within that space as though it's happening inside his own body. Every conversation that's being had in a Serete, he is able to hear all of it. He knew about Ichigo as well as Aizen's entire insurrection. He even knew about Yumichika's true Shikai Ruryo Kujaku, a secret that Yumichika had kept from everyone in the 11th Division. Azashiro knew this because the very air in the room where Yumichika trained was a part of him. Even from within Muken, the ability remained partially active. He was still able to perceive events throughout the Serete from the deepest underground prison, and it's from within Muken that one of the most impressive demonstrations of this power takes place. Azashiro used his Bankai to move freely within the prison and personally remove the seals placed on Aizen's mouth, ears, and left eye, thus freeing his senses one by one. He did this with precision in an environment that's designed to suppress Zanpakutō abilities. When Aizen could finally see again, he immediately recognized Azashiro as the former 8th Kenpachi, and during their conversation, Aizen flat out admitted that Kyōka Suigetsu would be useless against him. The novel states that using his hyper-awareness, Azashiro was able to outmaneuver Kyōka Suigetsu, though it took him 2 days to fully calibrate his senses in order to do so. The fact that it's possible at all puts him in a category shared by almost nobody else in Bleach. The second major ability of Urozakuro is Setai Yugo, or living body fusion. This is the ability he used to kill Kuriyashiki within an instant. Azashiro forcibly merges with a victim's body and targets their internal organs and muscles, destroying them from the inside out. The victim doesn't even get a chance to react because the attack originates inside their own flesh. The third ability is Utsusu, which translates to imitate. Because Azashiro had fused with the Shinigami Research and Development Institute's supply of Gigai, he's gained the ability to control their mouths and hands remotely across multiple locations at the same time. Now, this is important because mouths and hands are all you need to cast Kidō. Azashiro was able to summon hundreds of Gigai across different areas and have them all chanting high-level Kidō spells at the exact same time. During his battle with Kenpachi, he used this technique to cast multiple instances of Hado number 96 Itokaso, the same forbidden spell that Yamamoto used against Aizen during the Fate Karakura Town arc, and he does this simultaneously without sacrificing any part of his own body. The Gigai served as the catalysts instead. The fourth key ability of Urozakuro is blade manipulation and environmental control. Azashiro is able to shape and manipulate everything that he has fused with. He can manifest hundreds of invisible blades from the air around his opponents and kill them without moving a muscle or even looking in their direction. This is how he defeated hundreds of Shinigami during his revolt against the Gotei 13. Soifon admitted that despite all of their efforts, they were never able to lay a hand on him. He can also teleport vast distances near instantaneously by moving through the matter that he's merged with. He materialized inside the captain's emergency meeting mid-conversation and nobody detected him approaching. In the spaces that he hasn't yet fused with, the teleportation is slower, but in the Serete where he spent 250 years embedding himself into the infrastructure, he could be anywhere at any time. And by merging fully with the surrounding air, Azashiro becomes invisible to the naked eye and functionally untouchable by conventional attacks. Kenpachi Zaraki himself acknowledged this during their fight, stating that if his opponent hides in the air, he'll have to cut the air itself to hurt him. The spirit of Urozakuro has her own personality. personality, motivations, and at times, she actively works against Azashiro. Over 100 years before the events of the Spirits Are Forever With You light novel, Urahara was testing a new training tool at Sōkyoku Hill. This is a Gigai doll designed to materialize a Zanpakutō spirit when stabbed. When he tested it with Benihime, the doll didn't transform into his own spirit, it transformed into a woman whose eyes were covered by a leather obi. She introduced herself as Urozakuro, the Zanpakutō of Kenpachi Azashiro, currently imprisoned within Muken. Despite having never met Urahara or Yoruichi before, she knew everything about them. She knew Yoruichi's role in the onmitsu Kidō, and she knew details about their operations. Urozakuro had 30 minutes while the doll was active, and she spent that time freely discussing her own abilities and the specifics of Azashiro's power. She did this willingly as she told Yoruichi that she wanted to see her wielder fall into crisis. His own Zanpakutō spirit was out here leaking classified information about his weaknesses because she wanted to see him challenged. All of this was reported to the Central 46, but they kept it a secret in order to avoid causing panic. It was Yoruichi who had brought this information to the emergency captain's meeting after Azashiro's escape. She also appeared to be frustrated that Urozakuro had been running her mouth, confirming that there is a genuine adversarial dynamic between Urozakuro and Sōya Azashiro. Urozakuro's Shikai has no ability of its own. In its sealed form, it looks like a generic Asauchi with no distinguishing features, but when the Bankai deactivates and Urozakuro returns to Shikai form, all of the reishi that Azashiro had fused with during the Bankai state gets drawn back toward him and compressed into the form of a single blade. Azashiro states that having previously merged with most of the Seirete, his Shikai has accumulated enough power to surpass the Sōkyoku, the execution weapon which is said to have the destructive force of 1,000,000 Zanpakutō. The trade-off for this is severe though, as deactivating the Bankai means Azashiro loses his fusion with everything. He'd have to start from scratch if he wanted to re-merge with the Seirete, a process that originally took him years to complete. So it's a final gambit. He sacrifices all of his environmental control and sensory dominance in exchange for raw, concentrated annihilation. All of Urozakuro's abilities were put to the test during Azashiro's battles with Kenpachi Zaraki across the light novels. The results of these battles reveal to us a lot about the ceiling of Urozakuro's Bankai. Their first encounter takes place in the Dangai as Kenpachi is heading to Karakura Town. Azashiro appears and blocks his path as Kenpachi wastes no time swinging at him, but Azashiro vanishes into the air. Kenpachi's solution is to cut the air then, as Azashiro responds by activating Utsusu, summoning Gigai that begin casting multiple high-level Kidō spells at the same time. Kenpachi survives the barrage as he admits he may have underestimated his opponent, but by the time that he's ready to re-engage, Azashiro has already left. The second battle takes place inside a Garganta, and the escalation here is frightening as Azashiro has his Gigai cast multiple instances of Ito Kaso, trapping Zaraki in a firestorm of the same forbidden Kidō that Yamamoto used against Aizen. He was almost certain that this would be the killing blow, but Kenpachi walked out of the flames alive. Azashiro starts throwing everything that he has, fusing with multiple objects, launching attacks from every conceivable angle, and eventually he resorts to Seitei Yugo, trying to merge with Kenpachi's body and to destroy him from within. This ultimately fails as Kenpachi's Reiatsu had grown so monstrously dense during the course of their fight that it was burning the very reishi around him, thus making fusion physically impossible. A voice then echoes through the Seirete from Muken as Aizen explains that Zaraki lost to Ichigo not because Ichigo was inherently stronger, but because Ichigo's power was transcending faster than Zaraki's instincts could adapt. Azashiro's mistake was the same one. He fought gradually, testing the waters, holding options in reserve. This gave Kenpachi's fighting instinct the room that it needed to grow mid-battle and eventually surpass everything that Azashiro could throw at him. After the fight, Azashiro survives and voluntarily returns to Muken. When he arrives, Aizen is waiting as he tells Azashiro that he had calculated a 10% chance of victory if Azashiro had used his Shikai from the very beginning instead of relying on the Bankai's versatility. reality. The author of Spirits Are Forever With You, Ryogo Narita, independently figured out through Kubo's subtle foreshadowing that Kenpachi subconsciously matches his Reiatsu to his opponents because he craves fighting on the brink of death. He wrote this into the novel. When Kubo reviewed the manuscript, he was genuinely shocked. This was a plot point that Kubo had been planning to reveal during the Thousand Year Blood War arc. And these Spirits Are Forever With You light novels were released before the Thousand Year Blood War arc was in its manga form. And Narita had even offered to remove these additions from the light novel in order to avoid spoiling the manga, but Kubo insisted that it stay as he called it proof of how deeply Narita understood his work. So a lot of the work that's been written by him in these light novels like Can't Be Your Own World and Spirits Are Forever With You, they're not just non-canon material. They're content that Kubo has personally overseen and approved, and yet this is proof that he's even praised Narita for the accuracy of him following Kubo's vision. The most crippling weakness of Urozakuro is the stagnant body. Because Urozakuro has been in Bankai for over 250 years continuously, Azashiro's physical body has been unable to train or develop in any way during that entire time. Urozakuro herself warned that if the Bankai were ever negated, Azashiro would be so physically feeble that even a random Rukongai thug would be able to kill him. And this isn't an exaggeration. During his confrontation with Don Kanonji, a misfired Hado spell caused by Don Kanonji's staff was able to seriously injure Azashiro. The second weakness of Urozakuro is absorption, and this is the one that truly threatens to unravel everything. Because Azashiro's Bankai functions by fusing his being with Reishi, any ability that absorbs Reishi is catastrophically dangerous to him. The damage that he sustains from absorption attacks is dozens of times worse than what a normal person would experience, because the Reishi being wiped away is literally a part of him. This was demonstrated in the light novels when Uryu's Let Steel Quincy ability activated and it began enslaving the surrounding Reishi, causing Azashiro tremendous pain as the spiritual particles that he was fused with were forcibly ripped under someone else's control. This is also why he confiscated Yumichika's Ruryo Kujaku, which absorbs Reiatsu, and Uryu's Quincy Cross earlier in the story, because he knew exactly how dangerous those abilities were to him specifically. You can't fault him, he is a tactician, hence why he identified his own hard counters and he removed them from the playing field before anyone could use them. The Picaro creatures later exploited this same vulnerability with their Chucheria ability, forming a ring around the area that Azashiro was fusing with and creating a Reishi black hole that nearly tore him apart. The third weakness is the time requirement. Fusing with the Serete wasn't something he achieved overnight. Like I've mentioned, it took a lot of years. In the human world, the problem is worse because the human world is composed of Kishi rather than Reishi, making the fusion process significantly slower and more difficult. This is why he was frustrated during his time in Karakura Town, as expanding his control over there took far more effort than it ever did in the Soul Society. The final weakness is living beings violently reject the Bankai's presence when Azashiro attempts to fuse with them. Setai Yugo is devastating when it connects, but the internal damage Azashiro sustains as blowback can be severe. Kuriyashiki's body fought the fusion hard enough to leave Azashiro seriously wounded, even as Kuriyashiki was dying. Against Kenpachi, whose Reiatsu had reached a level where it was incinerating the surrounding spiritual particles, fusion became outright impossible, so the technique that killed the 7th Kenpachi in an instant was rendered completely useless against the 11th Kenpachi. When you look at the most powerful Bankai in Bleach, from Yamamoto's Zanka no Tachi to Ichibe's Shirafude Ichimonji to Zaraki's unnamed Berserker form to even Senjumaru's Bankai, which shook all of the 3 realms upon its activation, none of them provide this combination of unique capabilities. Omniscient awareness across an entire dimension, teleportation, intangibility, the ability to kill opponents from within their own body, mass Kidō deployment through remote vessels, immunity to the most feared Zanpakutō in the series Kyōka Suigetsu, and a Shikai failsafe that compresses an entire city's worth of spiritual matter into a weapon stronger than the Sōkyoku. Most Bankai typically amplify a single dimension of combat speed or destructive output or a specific zone of effect. Urozakuro literally makes the battlefield hostile. Kyōka Suigetsu distorts what you perceive, Urozakuro controls what's actually there. At the end of the Spirits Are Forever With You light novel, novels, we learn that Azashiro goes back to Muken voluntarily, but before he does, he steals a vial of Mayuri's superhuman drug, the same one that he used against Xylopero, the one that makes a single second feel like 100 years. He injects this vial into his own neck, but not as a punishment, but rather as a training tool. He intends to use the perceived eternity of isolation in order to reclaim what he had lost, in order to master his Zanpakutō through will rather than convenience, and to finally learn Urozakuro's true release command and unlock the Shikai that he never knew. In the darkness of Muken, he asks Urozakuro to reveal herself. She removes the bands covering her face, and for the first time he sees that she bears the likeness of his older sister, the sister whose dying wish set him on this path 250 years ago. Aizen tells Azashiro that he looks forward to seeing whether if he'll be a good neighbor or a good enemy, as Azashiro replies that the next time that they meet, he might be someone entirely different. Shunsui, who saw him off before his return to Muken, quietly remarks that Azashiro has finally been freed from the name Kenpachi. As far as we know, Sōya Azashiro is still down there in Muken training and fusing, and surely he'll be centuries deep into a self-imposed superhuman drug loop where every second stretches into lifetimes of practice. If Kubo ever decides to bring Azashiro back into the story, he is most definitely going to be a problem that the Gotei 13 isn't prepared for. Now, we've reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. Did you know about Azashiro before watching this video? Do you agree that Urozakuro is the most broken Bankai in all of Bleach, or is there a contender that I've overlooked? Let me know by continuing all of the discussion in the comments, and lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.